Our next speaker is going to be Art Harman. Art Harman is the former legislative director to Congressman Stockman, who was the congressman from the district in Houston where Johnson Space Center is. So he was heavily involved with the space program and the politics of the space program. And he's going to talk about the two-person Mars flyby mission, which perhaps Dennis Tito has backed out of, but it still could be the right idea and the way we can get our space program moving again. So.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much. I'm glad to be here and to talk about what could be the most innovative and inspirational, truly, adventures in space, something that'll really get our space program back on track. As Dr. Zubrin indicated, Dennis Tito sort of brought back to the future the concept of a Mars flyby. Now that had been on NASA's books for literally decades. Back in 1966, they developed the concept, and interestingly, the architecture is not much different than we need today. But NASA now has been talking about, well, maybe in 2033 we'll do that. Well, here's the problem. We can do that today with basically existing technology, and to wait until 2033 will set our space program back a decade or more. First off, I want to recognize the Mars Society participants who last year worked on the Inspiration Mars Student Design Contest. If there's anyone in the room today who worked on that, please stand up. But those people took the challenge of designing a Mars flyby mission, and we got many good creative ideas out of that. So, the Mars Society truly is a product of its members, and we had many people who contributed to that. So, thank them very much. The flyby concept. If you were, those are the, is to go in a, what's called a free return, where you go around from Earth. In this case, we can go to Venus in 2021. That's a new thing from the 2018 Dennis Tito mission, all the way to Mars, and then back home to Earth. And it's essentially the Apollo 8 of the space program, because it will validate all the technologies of getting to and from Mars, life support, the spacecraft, habitats, things like that. So it is a very key part of going to Mars. Those familiar with Dennis Tito's concept, the idea was to go on a Mars-only flyby in 2018. Now, the window for that has closed because it's just happening too soon. The political realities are not there, need a little bit more development time. So there's a 2021 mission that adds Venus and only adds about 80 days to the total, 582 days. And so let's go through the flyby. Imagine it's November 2021, and hundreds of millions of people worldwide are watching as two astronauts board a unique spacecraft. Cheers echo around the world as the rocket soars not to the International Space Station as we're used to, but goes where no one has gone before, to Mars, and in this case, to Venus. And again, not in the 2030s, but in just 6 years from now. So the spacecraft would go out. Now, this is based on Dennis Tito's latest architecture based on SLS and Orion. Certainly that gives a single launch capability. Certainly it could be configured for a dual Falcon Heavy launch. I'm using this here because I've got the graphics of it, and I worked with Dennis Tito and his team in evaluating the project while in Congress. So I'm familiar with this. Astronauts will speed past lunar orbit, and that's a famous photo we saw recently of the moon from 1 million miles away in front of Earth, which is a really, really cool vision, and perhaps our astronauts would see something like that as they leave Earth orbit entirely. So for about 133 days, they'll be heading towards Venus. And the sun's going to get larger than you've ever seen it before. And pretty soon, Venus will, herself will grow, and all eyes will be on Venus as our astronauts watch the flyby from just 6,800 miles away. And you know, you're going to have these oh my God moments. It's one thing to look at some probe, or even Curiosity zooming in on something, and that's pretty cool. But to be witnessing astronauts saying, oh my God, look at this. I could never imagine it'd be like this. We're flying past Venus and so forth. Now, when you're flying past Venus, there will be opportunities, of course, for science. Perhaps we can launch a swarm of CubeSats to Venus orbit. That would depend on the mass of the available on the launch. But then as Venus recedes, then the sun again shrinks first to Earth size view, and then smaller and smaller. During the long transits, the astronauts will be performing experiments, spending kind of like on ISS, spending time exercising, prepping food, maintaining the life support and other equipment. They won't take a shower for nearly 2 years. But they will put to test everything we're learning on ISS regarding avoiding bone loss and muscle loss and setting new records and earning more than a few 100 million frequent flyer miles. Those miles won't ever expire. We'll make sure of that. And it's lonely out there. You know, this would be a two-person mission, and I think they will be very eager to talk to people. And so do come to the Mars Society Convention during 2022, because you can bet that just like last night, we had a live feed from The Martian, and Annie Weir will definitely have live feeds from the astronauts as they're flying in deep space. To reduce solar irradiation exposure, the spacecraft may be oriented with the boost stage facing the sun. That helps for solar radiation, but not, of course, cosmic radiation. However, this is, you know, as we've learned from Curiosity, on its transit, the threat is a lot less than many thought, and you know, what do? You simply tell the astronauts, hey, you might die from a million things on this voyage. Are you game? And they'll say, hell yes. Okay, you've got consent, go for it. You know, scrap those 3% increase in this. That is the prescription for never going anywhere. But continuing our voyage, Mars grows larger, and then huge as our astronauts get close. Again, before we pass Mars, we'll have more opportunities for science, and hopefully we can launch a swarm of CubeSats towards Mars. This here shows for the InSight mission, possibility of having CubeSats watch the entry, descent, and landing. And I'm sure that people in this room would be delighted to work on CubeSats that just might go to Mars and go into Mars orbit with our astronauts on that way. As this is sort of all front-loaded. In just 133 days, our astronauts are going to Venus, and then by day 324, still under a year, they're flying by Mars. The return home is a bit longer, but this is an amazing experience for doing for learning how to go to and back from Mars. Even more, gone will be the days of wistfully counting off the anniversaries of our amazing feats of years past. It's kind of bittersweet to be saying, oh my gosh, okay, this is the 40 this and the 40 that anniversary of the moon landing. That's important, but how about new anniversaries? Okay, the first anniversary of returning from the flyby and hearing that, the first Martian launch for landing is now scheduled for 10 years from there or whatever. And as the astronauts return to Earth, it will not be the beginning. It really will be the beginning, because what will we have accomplished? We will have focused everyone's attention on Mars like nothing possible. The asteroid mission will just kind of disperse everyone, and they'll be thinking, okay, so 2025 we get one mission with a few astronauts going to one boulder about the size of this podium. They'll take some pieces and come home. That's it. That's it for the 2020s. This will inspire people in ways that we can't imagine, but it'll be kind of like the Apollo era. And what does it really all build up to? It sets the stage for truly that historic moment as an astronaut takes that first step onto the dusty red surface of Mars. The Apollo 8 validated everything so well for landing. We wouldn't have wanted to have just gone to the moon and landed all in one. We did a bunch of steps. This is that first step. And basically it robs it from 2033. It yanks it back to 2021. And what's that going to do? It's going to force NASA to then give us more actual landings in the 2030s, instead of saying, well, we'll have a flyby then, and then maybe in the late 2030s we'll orbit, and then sometime in the 2040s maybe we'll test a landing, 2050s this, and maybe on the 100th anniversary of the lunar landing, then we can actually put boots on the ground. I don't think we'll want to wait that long, and this will force both the inspirational aspects to the forefront, but it's also going to force the development of the necessary components. Just like Apollo 8, they had to make sure everything was right. But this is going to force the development of life support and everything else for the voyage. Inspiration Mars was run by Dennis Tito, Paragon Space Development Corporation, and they actually make a lot of life support and other equipment. And they devoted, during the time that they were involved in the project, a lot of effort to on life support. Again, the asteroid mission is too small for the United States. One mission. As I was saying yesterday, it's not just a matter of slow rolling the space program, because China, Russia, and who knows, maybe India and others will leapfrog us. They'll leave us in the background, and we may not have be able to recover. If there's a Chinese lunar base at the same time that we're trying to drill a few pieces of core from an asteroid, nobody's going to be watching that. They're going to be watching the astronauts on the moon, the Chinese astronauts. And as I also warned, space ruled by China and Russia will not necessarily be friendly either for commercial space or for the United States. So once we have the flyby in operation, here's a few things that can happen. I think kids are going to start screaming, "I'm going to Mars." You know, just like kids were probably saying that in the 60s. They'll practice taking footsteps on new worlds. Red sand will become popular for sandboxes. Students will want to be part of the mission and write apps and design components and planning with new eagerness for careers in STEM. Morale at NASA and commercial space will soar because they'll have a bold new goal in the very, very near future. I found enthusiastic support within NASA for the Mars flyby since the concept was developed. They were really impressed by that, and they you know, a lot of folks in NASA, they would give their right arm to work on that rather than the asteroid. The public will once again believe we can be a great nation leading the way to Mars. Congress will step forward with funding and support. Currently, Congress is very tepid towards the asteroid mission, but not so much that they're willing to directly challenge the president on it. Few words about the technical aspects. Again, this is Dennis Tito's single launch concept using Orion and SLS, and it would involve the initial Block 1B SLS, Orion with a thermal protection rated for the return velocity, exploration upper stage, plus a Cygnus, Bigelow, or other habitat. Those elements are under construction today, and we could go to the moon. If we could go to the moon in just 8 years, we can certainly develop the life support and other elements in 6 years. We knew nothing about going to the moon in 1961, but we got there. Of the challenges, again, life support is important. On the space station, as one of our previous speakers said, when the toilet breaks, that's priority number one. So yesterday's coffee is today's coffee, as the astronauts call it. So some things, when you're 500 million miles from home, must be perfect. So we'll be working on that in 6 years. Yeah, we can have that pretty darn perfect. This would be the overall launch targets. There's some other stuff in there too, but there would be EM1, which is the unmanned launch past the moon, EM2, which is the first crewed one, and then EM3, and that one would be used to test the habitat and so forth, go out maybe for a month or more to lunar orbit. Then EM3 would be the Mars-Venus flyby. That was the 1966 Mars flyby habitat. ISS would be a part of this because, you know, ISS should be a lot greater utilized to test life support and other things for deep space missions. We have the 1-year mission on ISS right now, and it would be possible to do an 18-month mission as well in the maybe 2018 or something, or longer, just to get that physiological data, so our astronauts will be even better prepared. I'll have take some questions in a moment, but then the next step would be, how can we get there from here? Well, number one, you can always call your members of Congress and ask them to support this. Replace the asteroid mission with the Mars-Venus flyby. If you talk to members of the space subcommittees in both the House and the Senate, you'll be best prepared to be, talking to the people best able to frame the debate. And then, this is summer recess. Members are back home, so that makes it really easy to talk to them and their senior staff. And then, as Dr. Zubrin has said, go meet the presidential candidates. Tell them why this is important. because this is something I want the presidential candidates to know about. So in November, as the winner is in the transition team, they can say, okay, what can we do to reverse all the decay during the Obama era? All right, well, this here, the Flyby, will be a very big, bold return to mission, if you will. And so I hope they will, give that an immediate green light while they prepare a plan that'll really take us to Mars. Happy to take some questions. While we're doing questions, I'm going to play this little video here, which gives you a little animation of it. So questions, please. Yes?
And it's on, is that correct? Okay. The somewhat lighthearted thing is who will be the Disney of the 21st century? Because remember, Werner von Braun, Walt Disney, a lot of us are here because of that. So we need something like that to do the promotion. Somebody with a vision who also has a weekly TV show, if possible.
Well, I think a new president, if properly briefed on this, could then become sort of a JFK-like champion for it. Engineers and everything else like that, we've got them, and I think they'll just be ready to roll up their sleeves.
But the popular thing was we had these.
I cannot hear.
Oh, the popular thing is we had this TV show that every once in a while would have the vision of the future from somebody.
Today, just so I can take more questions, you saw Andy Weir last night. He's got his movie coming out. I think there'll be a lot of things like that. We have social media today. There'll be so much publicity about this, you won't be able to escape it. And there'll be a Flyby app, so you can stay in tune with it.
The second question was, is there any idea of possibly using the Flyby to send something to Phobos, a penetrator, to get data on Phobos?
No, probably not, because you're talking about mass. I mean, if we can take some CubeSats and put them into orbit, maybe we can do that, but you don't want to pack too much into this, or you risk of violating the mass limits. Okay, blue shirt. Not for this. We want to get there. We want to come back. We don't want to spend a decade or more developing a stable spinning spacecraft. That would be a whole different evolution that we would not want to get into. Keep it simple. Get there. And the 2 years is not going to be that big on weight loss. They may have trouble walking when they return to Earth. Okay, next question. Standing up.
Yeah. So, without getting into specific politics, do you have any ideas as to of the current suite of presidential candidates on either side who would be most amicable to this?
No, but that should be our job for the next 6 months while the candidates are accessible. There's a few of them that have, got a few bits of space policy that they've talked about. Cruz being the head of the space subcommittee in the Senate, I think he's pretty favorable to things like this. Bush gave a speech or some mention of the space program that was generally favorable. Bernie Sanders, there was a quote about him saying, well, we shouldn't have a space program or something, that money should be spent on the poor. My organization, Coalition to Save Man's Space, I intend to list all of the SaveManSpace.com, where candidates stand on space from their positions and questionnaires. Next.
Dr. Zubrin's has been emphasizing that we should encourage the candidates to adopt a manned mission to Mars within 8 years, within the two-term presidency. So which way do we go when we talk to these candidates? Do we talk about the Mars flyby, or do we
This,
talk?
this is the first step. You have to do a flyby. That's the Apollo 8. That validates that you can get there and back. Doing an orbital mission, going to Mars and orbiting, that's a lot more complicated. And so this is the first step. Basically, we're just grabbing it from the year 2033, dragging it to the year 2021, and saying, okay, okay, now NASA, you've got to land us on Mars. 2033 sounds kind of cool. So we're just advancing everything that would have been done anyway if we're going to be on Mars, and we're yanking it to the present lot sooner. So it's element one of actually going to Mars. So, and it's big and bold and soon. That's one of the key factors in the space program. You got to have stuff that comes soon enough to keep the population, people interested. And the asteroid mission, people are going to be bored to tears. They're going to be waiting a decade before astronauts actually get outside their spacecraft and do something. If they caught an asteroid boulder, something that looks mildly interesting. Okay, here they are drilling into this little piece of an asteroid. Ooh, they've got a core sample. Great. Okay, bye. Back to Earth. This will captivate people far, far more. Next question. Left.
Hi, I have a question about really international cooperation because, what could maybe NASA do to help out something like China or Russia to maybe do a mission like this? Because, I don't really care who does it. I just want us to go to Mars, right? And so, right now we're using Russian flights to accomplish certain things. And I'm just
Well, we have.
how could we work together if that's maybe the best shot?
Sure, yeah, and thank you. I'm sure that some of our ISS partners would be interested in partnering with us on this. This is almost so dirt simple that it may not need much, but maybe, say, ESA could contribute, life support or the Trans-Hab module, things like that. I'm not a favor of partnering with China because they steal our technology and then they use it. So what do? They'll steal our very, very, very highest high technology, and then they'll cut us out of the loop. That's the entire MO of the way China operates. And so China, under their current regime, is not a trustable partner. If any more proof is needed, look at how they're upsetting 400 years of international law and practice in stealing the international seas in the South China Sea, Yellow Seas, and East China Sea to come. But certainly, when we're going to Mars, I think we'll have a much more robust a lot of robust international partners that we can count on and trust.
Thank you.
Do I have
think
more?
we have one more question.
One
probably.
more?
Yeah, hi. I've heard even very high-profile people assert that humans to Mars is too dangerous because of solar flares being one thing that you hear a lot. This mission seems, with the Venus flyby, there's that additional element of scare factor to people who are really concerned about solar flares. Are there studies of this particular architecture that you can refer to with real data on risk?
Thank you. What we do know from having instrumented Curiosity to measure radiation through the whole voyage is that the radiation levels are a lot lower than we thought. And they'll have shelters. So when there's solar storms, they'll get into their shelters. You put water around the habitat, and water is a very, very good shield for radiation. Well, thank you all very, very much.